Welcome to Social Studies again today, everybody. Today, we're going to walk through the lesson from October 29th and 30th. If you have any questions as we're going through this, please make sure to send me an email or contact me in some way so that I can help you with anything you are struggling with. I want you to be successful at the work we're doing here. So we talked about the election process to start class. So we went kind of through the whole process, starting with primaries and caucuses. And primaries and caucuses are events that are held in each state in order to help the political parties select the candidate that is going to run and represent their party. So we'll use the Democrats as an example. This year, the primaries and caucuses for the Democrats started in January, and there was many people running for the Democrats in order to pursue the presidency. So there were lots of different candidates that wanted to be the Democratic representative. And so it goes through each state, and in some states they have primaries. So the primary is a process in which voters basically select the person that they think would make the best candidate, and a caucus is a little bit voting different, as it says here. It's a voting process where participants divide themselves into groups according to the candidate they support. And then each candidate has to earn a certain percentage of participants in order to reach the next round. And you keep narrowing it down until you get to just one candidate that represents your party. It's a long process. These primaries and caucuses don't happen all on the same day. It happens over many months, so it often starts in January and will run all the way through June. Typically, we will know who the candidate is going to be before you get to June, but the primaries and caucuses do run that long. They do go on that far. And then there is a nominating convention. And at that nominating convention, delegates nominate their candidate. So they find a delegate, a person is sent to represent the states. So you can see in this picture, there's people sent to represent Rhode Island and Louisiana and Connecticut. And they nominate or formally choose the person that they want to represent their party. So these are nominating conventions that happen. The delegates are the people who officially nominate the candidate who voters in their state want to run for president. In August of 2020, delegates from both political parties had conventions. So I mentioned the Democrats already, but the Republicans also had primaries and caucuses. The difference is the Democrats were trying to decide between many different candidates, and the Republicans really only had one choice, and that was Donald Trump. There was nobody else that was running against him for that nomination. Where the Democrats had Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Amy Klobuchar, Kamala Harris. There were lots of different people running for the nomination for the Democrats. Once candidates are nominated, and even before this, they do a lot of campaign fundraising. Campaigns cost a lot of money. The Obama campaign, or the Obama election in 2008, was the first time a candidate spent more than $1 billion. That's a billion with a B, running for president. And they do lots of different things to raise that money. And you can see kind of a list of rules on the right over here. But I really want to talk about how they spend that money. You see it all over the place. Through advertising, on TV, on social media, on Hulu, on YouTube. There's lots of advertising that goes on. They also requires a lot of campaign staff to run these campaigns. There'll be hundreds of people working for each candidate during this time to work towards getting them elected. And that costs a lot of money. There's also renting space. The candidates have events in all these different states, and they have to fly to those events. They have to provide security. They have to make sure that all this infrastructure is in place in order for that event to happen. And so that costs a lot of money as well. So campaigns have become very expensive. And you can see some places where the candidates raise money on this map as well. And then we get to the actual election. So our presidential election is an indirect election. That means we as voters don't directly select the president. We on the ballot will choose the person we want to be president, but that vote then selects the electors. So electors are chosen for each state, and those electors will submit their votes for the president, and they represent the choices of the state. So you'll see in Wisconsin we have 10 electoral votes, and all 10 of those electoral votes will go to one candidate. It's not split like one candidate would get some number and one candidate would get another set of numbers. Whoever wins, so let's say Joe Biden were to win Wisconsin, even if it's by one vote, he would get all 10 electoral votes. The first candidate to select 270 electoral votes, the first candidate to get 270 electoral votes, is the person that will be the next president of the United States. What that causes sometimes is where you get a popular vote, meaning the direct election results are not the same as the Electoral College. So in 2016, Hillary Clinton actually received a larger percentage of the popular vote than Donald Trump, but Donald Trump won more states. He won the popular vote in 30 states. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote in 20 states. And so Donald Trump was elected president, even though when you added up all the votes from all of the states, Hillary Clinton had more total votes. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about was when and how you vote. So this year's a little different. Every year you can vote early, but this year is a lot of people are voting early. As of this morning, I heard about 80 million people had already voted. So early voting is any means of voting that takes place before the actual day of the election. This can include in-person or voting by mail. Absentee voting, sometimes called mail-in voting, requires a voter to request a ballot and submit the ballot, typically by mail, by an assigned date prior to the election. It doesn't have to be by mail. You can vote in person as well in some places. And election day voting is typically the most common. It requires the voting to go to your local polling place and fill out a ballot on the day of the election. The actual day of the election is always on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November, or in other words, the first Tuesday after November 1st. This year that happens to be on November 3rd. And you can see every state sets up their election a little differently. And so one example is who's allowed to mail and vote. And so you can see in some states that are in green, people primarily vote by mailing in. In the states that are yellow, you can request a mail-in ballot. So Wisconsin would be a place where you can request a mail-in ballot. And in red, you have to have a reason, an actual excuse in order to vote early. So every state sets it up a little different, but each state does allow some version of early voting. After we talked about that, and we had some discussions around those different ideas, so that took a good chunk of class. We went back and started working on our election project, our Election 2020 graphic organizer. And so we continued to work on this. Today we really focused on looking at the election. So you had 2 links here that are basically playing around with the different states and what are the current forecasts for those states and what happens if Joe Biden wins one state versus Donald Trump winning one state and how that affects the outcome or potential outcomes for the election. There was a quiz here where you can find out what political party you might lean towards a little bit more. This is totally anonymous, but it gives you some insight into some of your thinking. Do you lean a little more Democratic? Do you lean a little more Republican? Here are some sample ballots. So this is the actual ballot for Verona that I used when I voted. I voted early. And so you can see this says big sample across it, but you can see who the different candidates were for president or are for president for the congressional districts and for other county and state offices. So you can see all these different people that are running for various offices in Verona. It'll look different if you look at the Fitchburg one, because there's different things on the ballot in Fitchburg because they're in a different district, and so there might be different local officials that they are voting for. And finally, there is a link here where you can look at where the candidates stand on various issues. So if you want to see what Donald Trump feels about immigration, you can click on that and get his views. and you can compare those to Joe Biden's views on those issues. So this is a good place for you to look at the various views of some of the major issues in our country. Again, on the right-hand side here, I want you taking notes, asking questions, completing these thoughts. This makes me think, I'm surprised that, some questions I have. You should be filling all of this out on the right. And again, you need to do at least 3 of these. 5 if you're heading, all 5 of them if you're working towards Exceeds Mastery. Again, if you have any questions, please let me know, and I will help you any way I can. Have a great day.